I love Nestle's Toll House chocolate chip cookies. So I came up with a really great illustration about cookies and following Jesus. Today we're going to pick back up in Luke 6 as we've been talking about the disciples and how Jesus chose these particular men to be a part of his inner circle. But remember, this series was videotaped many, many years ago. And I'm going back and trying to cut down a lot of these lessons and cut out the things that happened years ago that don't matter today. But apparently this particular video was the first one back after our summer vacation, which is why this is going to be a little bit longer than normal, because I had a lot to talk about, I guess. Things like squirrels and cookies and dogs and driver's license. Plus, I was laughing as I looked at this video because I guess I cut my hair back then and ended up with bangs. So that kind of made me laugh. But anyway, here you go. Hopefully you get something out of this in Luke chapter 6. Thank you for the break. It was really lots and lots of fun to go away. The plan was to go up. We went Memorial Day to Flagstaff, and we were going to just come home and work here, and we had 1 week we were going to California. But when we got to Flagstaff, we had so much fun. It was so nice weather that Rob and I decided to stay a couple days and send the kids home. So Cheyenne calls me, she's our 18-year-old, in a panic when she gets home, and she's like, "Mom, there's a squirrel in your bathtub at home." Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, that's disgusting." And she says, "Can I just leave it here for you until you get back?" And I said, "No, you cannot do that, okay?" So then she goes and flips on the air conditioning because it was hot, and apparently we have a dead squirrel in the attic. Okay, so the whole house smells like death. So Rob and I decided that we are going to stay in Flagstaff. So that is what we did pretty much all summer long, and it was kind of fun. Most people have like scorpion problems, or nope, our house is squirrels. So now we're trapping them, and I won't let Rob kill them or shoot them. I'm like, we're going to trap them, and so once we trap them, then we have to take them out into the desert, and it's kind of pathetic. So, okay, it's what? Yeah, we should. Yeah, we have lots of coyotes where we live. They just aren't eating them. Okay, that's kind of sad. So that's how our summer started, and I want to tell you how it ended because it also ended with animals, but I have to give a little disclaimer here for a second, because people come here and they don't realize that the first 5 minutes I tell you something that happened with my family, and I got an email from someone who is watching online or from Roku or something, and they said, "Why do you always talk about your family? I'm going to have to find a Bible study that actually teaches the Bible." Okay, so if you are watching us and you don't want to hear about my family, fast forward for 5 minutes. You guys don't get that luxury. You get to have to hear this, okay, because it's kind of a cool story. So we're leaving Flagstaff on a Sunday. Wednesday, we are up there. We have 2 dogs, okay. We have Bella, who is a, lab. And we have Pogo, which is this, I told you about her last year. It's the daddy, I want a puppy card from our 18-year-old. She's like, "I want a puppy, I promise I'll take care of it, and I promise I'll feed it." And of course, you know how that lasted. About 1 week, Rob and I now are the parents of this little Maltese, white Maltese. Okay, so he's drives us nuts. He barks, he's spoiled, he's a brat. We have to keep gates up because he lifts his leg all over the house. So no one loves him that much. It's kind of pathetic. So when he was up in Flagstaff, I went home Wednesday to bring one of the kids home, and when I came back, Pogo was gone. Okay. Now Cheyenne especially doesn't like Pogo because he went into her room one day and lifted his leg on her Mac computer, and it destroyed it. If that ever happens, there's no way you can fix them. They throw it away. Mac will not go in and fix that kind of stuff. So, kind of a sad. So she hates this dog. So, anyway, so I come home and I walk in the door and there's Bella, but no Pogo. And so I walked into Rob and I'm like, "Rob, is Pogo dead?" Because he is, he's always all over when I get home. He's like, "No, he was just here." So we went calling all over, went through the forest. We got in little four-wheeler things, and we're, Pogo, where are you, Pogo? Gone, completely gone. It was kind of really sad. So Our little dog Bella was very, very sad that she didn't have Pogo, so we decided that we would get home on Sunday and we would get a new dog. So we found a dog, not a little bratty dog, but it's a border collie mixed with something really big, like a greyhound or something. So it's the cutest. It's this big monster dog, okay? And he jumps on the bed, and it's like Rob and me and the dog. And he lays out like we do, too. And so it's like ridiculous. So Wednesday comes around. Now Bella and the new dog, we call him Bogey. He's at home. And we have someone come to our house, and she says, Lisa, Pogo's not dead. Like, there is just no way Pogo would be dead. A coyote's not going to eat him because he chases the coyotes at our house. Like, we have a coyote that lives in our front yard, and he comes around the corner, and he, like, sits in our yard and is like, hey, can Pogo come out and play? So we let Pogo out. Pogo chases him up the hill. I mean, they're friendly at our house, coyotes, but they're not in Flagstaff. So I'm like, you know what? He was nowhere. So I started feeling guilty. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to call the Humane Society up in Flagstaff. Okay, and here's my conversation. Hi, I'm convinced that my dog was eaten by a coyote, but on the weird chance. Now, mind you, we're happy with our new life. Gates are down. Okay, no, we have no issues with our life any longer because we're like, we can live without this bratty dog. And the lady, I told her what it looked like, and she's got all excited. And she's like, I don't want to get your hopes up. And I'm like, trust me, you're not going to get my hopes up. So I said, okay, take a picture of him and text it to me. Yeah, you have that in your handout. There he is. That's Pogo. Straight out of Flagstaff Humane Society prison. Okay, yeah. So I sent it to Cheyenne, and she says, you know, it's not even like, is that Pogo or is that not Pogo? No, it's Pogo. Okay, so now we have 3 dogs. Okay? We had to drive to Flagstaff, pay $80 to get this bratty dog. He's really humble now, though. It's kind of weird. He's really kind of sweet. He doesn't. He learned his lesson where he was at. So anyway, that was my life this summer. So now we can talk about Bible. All right, today we have chocolate chip cookies at your table. I must love you a lot because I actually ironed all of those tablecloths, and I made those cookies for you guys. So I'm pretty awesome, okay? But actually, it's because of an illustration. Now, I tried to explain this illustration to my kids, and they looked at me with this blank look on their face, and I said, here's the deal. This is going to go really good, or it's going to go really bad. You're either going to get the illustration or you're not, and hopefully you do, and if not, just eat a cookie and you'll be happy. And but that'll be in a few minutes. So I want to just tell you, for those of you that are watching us on Roku or that are new here, I want you to understand why we do what we do. And we have about 3 things why we do this Bible study. One is that we just believe that if we read the Bible and study it, that the life and the words of Jesus will change our lives from the inside. And when it changes us, then we go out into the world and other people want to come to know Christ because of how our lives have changed. The second reason we do this is so that we can learn and be able to really differentiate between false teaching, false religion, false doctrine that's going on out there. I got this really good illustration from my gynecologist, okay? She gave this to me. Had to go for my annual. I ran out of my hormone patch, and if you're under 30, you have no idea what that is, but trust me, someday you will be like, I need one of those, okay? So I ran out, so I had to go in for my annual, which of course is, I hate doing that. They poke and they prod, and they do all this weird stuff. And so I walked in, she walks in the door, and I looked at her and I said, you pretty much have the worst job. Like, people don't even like you. Like, I mean, I'm sure you're a very nice person, but I dread coming to see you. Like, if you were like a Holy Land tour guide, you would be my best friend. But, and she laughed and she said, well, I would feel really uncomfortable if you actually did like to come and see me. So anyway, she was doing all that stuff, to see if I had any lumps or whatever. And I said, have you ever found a lump in someone? A dumb question, apparently. And she said, I do all the time. But she said, Lisa, when I first started doing this, the person who trained me, she said, I kept telling him, I need to know what abnormal looks like. I need to feel an abnormal lump, an abnormal this, and he said, no. He said, you have to know what is normal so well that when that lump comes along or when that abnormal, you will automatically know what it is. And I said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we do with Bible. And I said, because we want to know this so well that when somebody comes and knocks on our door and says, hey, I have this, you don't have the full gospel, you can stop and say, that's not true because I know what is in this. So that was the other reason why we do this. And then the reason is because we always say we named this Connecting the Dots for a reason, because we want to connect the dots between our life and our faith, because so many people don't do that. I'm trying to get comfortable up here and try to know what time it is so we don't talk all day. Because it's kind of like a Cardinals fan. If you go to the Cardinals football game and you have the jersey and you put it on for that Sunday and you're like, yay, go Cardinals, and you jump up and down, and then you go home and you take the shirt off and you don't think about them for the rest of the week. And we don't want that here. We want us to be able to say, look, I'm a follower of Christ, and that there's something about that affects every single thing in my life. And so that's what we're all about here. Now, because I read something this summer in Jeremiah, and it's in your handout, should be one of the first verses. And it was really interesting because I think that where we're going with this whole lesson for the next few weeks is what it means to be a true disciple follower of Christ, because there's so much goofy stuff out there. And what I realize is that there's so many people that just show up at church and then they walk away and nothing's ever changed. And we want to really hit hard on that. But I saw this in Jeremiah and I thought, oh my gosh, they had the same problems that we do today. If you are watching us online or on Roku, you can get these handouts. They are all online at connectwithfaith.com. There's a little section that says handouts, and they're all there, so you can actually just go online and do that. But look at Jeremiah 7, 9, and 10. And this is the Old Testament. This is what God says to these people. He says, will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, burn incense to Baal, and go after other gods that you have not known, and then dare to come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, by the discharge of this religious formality, we are set free, only to go on with this wickedness and these abominations. And see, they had the same problem that we do here, that people are like, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to raise my hands, thank you, Jesus, but I'm going to leave here and live however I want to. And I want to get a handle today on the disciples that followed Christ. They may have started out like that, but they never ended up like that. Because when you and I come to Christ, it is absolutely inevitable that we will change. We have to change. And I'm going to show you how that happens with a cookie. So what we're doing is we're doing part 3. Someone asked, I missed part 1 and 2. We're the only Bible study in the world that does part 1 and 2 and then takes 3 months off, okay? And comes back with 3. So it didn't mean to be that way, but it is. So what we're doing, my kids walked in this morning, and they saw the people like us, and they were like, oh, people like us. Like, are they liking you on Facebook? And I was like, serious? And then we get the vinyl, and Cheyenne goes, people like us. Oh, it's so cute. Like, people do like us. And I'm like, no, that's not what this means. So I have to explain the meaning of this. Okay. The disciples, we're right on a portion of the scriptures where Jesus picks his 12 disciples. And what we're trying to show you as we go through each one of these men is that they are people just like us. They had the same doubts, the same issues, the same problems, the same everything, and so they are people like us. So we're going to talk about what it means to be a disciple over the next few weeks, and I think it should be good. So we're going to kind of today do an overview of where we've been. I realize that, like, if I watch a TV series and then it has its final, and then when they redo it in 6 months, I can't even remember where we ended up. So we'll kind of do a little review, and then we'll do this other thing. So this is where we are. Luke 6, 12 through 16. It's on page 2. You would love this. I had this whole lesson put together yesterday. Sat down to eat to go over it, and I hated it. So I spent 3 hours cutting, pasting, flipping it around. So anyway, now this is what we're on. So this is where we are. In Luke 6, 12 through 16, one of those days, Jesus went out to the mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom also he designated apostles. So what we're doing in this study right now, if for those of you that weren't with us before, is we're going through each one of these men, well, the majority of them, the ones we know a lot about. Simon, who's named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, Simon, and all the rest of them. Okay, so we went through a lot of them the last few weeks. We have two left, okay? We have John and we have Judas. And so next week we're going to go through both of their lives, and we're going to be able to see one who starts really young. He's a goofball when he starts. We see him at 90, and we see this huge change in his life. And then we see Judas, who walked away from Jesus. How do you spend 3 years with Jesus and walk away from him? But people do that. And so we need to see why that happens, because I think a lot of people get disillusioned, disappointed with God. They don't understand, why God does what he does, and so they walk away. And I think for Judas, he just didn't, he thought Jesus was supposed to do one thing, and when he didn't, it disappointed him, and so he turned him in, and that was the end of that. So that's where we're kind of going. But at this particular time, what's happening is that Jesus picks these 12 people because he knows in 3 years he's going to the cross. 12 people that he's going to impart everything that he needs to impart to them about heaven and hell and forgiveness and loving people and how to get to heaven and all of those things to 12 people, with the purpose of you 12 go out and share this with the entire world. And because of those 12 people, we're actually doing this today because of what they did. So they spent time with Jesus, and Jesus trained them to everything that he wanted them to move on to other people, which is a really huge undertaking, because as we study these men, we realize one thing. They're just like us. They have bad habits. They have bad attitudes. The majority of the time, Jesus would say something and they'd be like, huh? Like, I have no idea what you're saying, Jesus, and that doesn't even make sense. And they're always confused, and I would say that looks a lot like us in the beginning stages of our Christian faith. They were confused. They doubting Thomas. He was like, I've seen you do all these things, but I still doubt. We do that too. A lot of times they didn't really love people. Jesus is trying to get them to love. They're like, yeah, I don't like them. I'm not going to love them. And that's just like us. So that's where this is coming from. They thought of themselves. They always felt like they were entitled. And they were very, very prejudiced. They were Jewish. They thought they were all about themselves. So what Jesus says is that I'm going to come in and I'm going to take you with all of these bad attitudes and all these bad ways of life, and I'm going to change you. And that's what being a Christian is all about. So I want to first get rid of the idea that Jesus chooses people and asks them to be his disciples because you're smart, you get A in Bible class, you just are a very compassionate and loving person, because none of these men were like that. They grew to be that way, and that's what I want to say, is that that's what you and I, when we come to faith in Christ, that's going to happen. It's inevitable that he's going to change us. Now, the problem that we find is this word Christian, okay, because it's pretty much Americanized to where it's ridiculous, and everybody and their brother says that they're a Christian. So if I were to go to my Mormon cousins and say, are you a Christian? They would say, absolutely. If you went to church on Christmas and Easter, and I'd say, are you a Christian? And you'd be like, well, of course, go to church twice a year. If you are a good person, you just naturally go feed the homeless, and you love, you're nice to people, you would say you are a Christian. If you said a prayer at 7, even though asking Jesus in your heart, but nothing's ever changed, you don't like to go to church, but you said that prayer, you would say you were a Christian. If you were baptized and you pray and you read your Bible, and I said, are you a Christian? You'd be yes. If your grandmother took you to church when you were 5, you'd say yes. So what happens is we have this really diluted message of what being a Christian is. And we have to stop that. Like, we have to get to the point of saying, let's not even use the word Christian any longer. Let's stop and say, what did Jesus call his followers? And what he called them were disciples. He didn't say, you are my Christian. There's only Christians used 3 times in the Bible. We'll go over that next week. But a disciple is something even more difficult than this Christian word. It's someone that says, I am going to read this, and I'm going to see what Jesus tells me to do, and I'm going to do it. because he tells me to do it. And I love him that much, and I want to serve him that much, that whatever he says, I'm going to do, because that's the relationship that we have. I don't do it because he gives me a bunch of rules. I do it because I love him. And that's why we have to read our Bibles to figure all that out. Now, the problem is that, and if you're here for the first time or you're listening to us for the first time, you're probably just wondering, like, what is this women's Bible study? Bible has something to do with church, and maybe you've never, ever even, you don't go to church because you did one time when you were a kid, maybe in college, and you would go drinking and partying with your friend Lydia, let's just call her, on Saturday night, and then on Sunday morning, she'd be like, hey, let's get up and go to church, and you go to church, and Lydia's praising Jesus, and then the next week, you're doing the same thing. And so now you're totally confused. And so Lydia says, hey, you got to date Bob. Bob is like so awesome. He loves the Lord, and he's just the greatest Christian. So you go out with Bob, and now Bob wants to have sex with you on the first night you're dating him, and now you're really confused. You're like, but I thought he was a Christian. And so we have these really mixed signals of people who say I'm a Christian, but they do completely different things. And there's this hypocrisy that's crazy. And so today I'm hoping when we're done with this, you'll understand why there's a lot of hypocrisy in the church. And hopefully it will make you understand what's going on. If maybe you never went to church because you thought it was boring, and this guy stood up and said, you can't do this, and you have to do this, and you're like, yeah, I'd rather just not do any of those things because it's much easier, then I'm hoping that we can dispel this notion today of this is just, being a Christian is a bunch of rules and regulations, what you can and can't do, because that's not true. That's not where we're going with this. And I talked to someone the other day who had never, ever walked into a church in her entire life. I was shocked. I'm like, never been to church? Never. Not as a kid. No one ever took her. And maybe if you're listening, maybe that's you. And you're like, I want to know God. I just don't have a clue how to do that. But I'm hoping that today when you walk away, you'll understand what being a Christian is. And a lot of people might be here because it's just time to come back. Because you've gotten busy, and it's easy to get distracted in life, and the kids are little, and you're busy doing women's stuff and making dinner and all that stuff, but you know that what's lacking is your relationship with God. So I'm hoping that however you found us today, that at any one of those issues that we're just glad that you're here, because I want to dispel any false notions of what Christians are really all about, because there's a lot of false Christianity going on. I got this really nice email from a girl the other day. Her name is Tanya, and she wrote me and she gave me her testimony, and it was amazing how she came to Christ, because she just didn't want to live anymore, and Jesus came in and really changed her. But this is what she said. She said, my mom has not spoken to me since May 21st. She wants her old Tanya back, but the minute Jesus came into my heart, I knew that was never going to happen. And I said, it was just a great reminder to me that says, people, when you come to Christ, and let's say you were a big party and you drank all the time, whatever, and now your friends, they want you to continue to do that with them. And yet Jesus comes in, and we always call it, he changes your wanter. The things that you used to want to do, you really just don't want to do anymore, because he has now grabbed a hold of your heart, and he is going to change you. Hence, my illustration about cookies. So, I want to talk about how the making of a cookie is kind of the same as the making of a Christian or a follower of Christ. And it all starts with something like this. If you want a genuine Nestle's Toll House cookie, you have to have this, okay? Rob went to the store. He's like, hey, Lisa, I found Kirkland brand chocolate chips. Nope. Can't do that. That would be a false chocolate chip cookie, okay? So if you want a real, true chocolate chip cookie, just like we're trying to be real, true, genuine followers of Christ, this is where it starts. So each one of these things I'm going to attach to something. So let's just say that this is Jesus, okay? I love chocolate chips. I love Jesus. It works for me, okay? But the thing is that if you want to have a genuine Nestle's Toll House, you have to have these. You can't have anything but this. This is the only thing you need to make it work. Now, if you look in your handout, 2 verses there, John 14:6, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Okay, so if you want to make a chocolate chip cookie the right way, you got to go through Nestle Toll House. You got to go through Jesus. That's just the way it is. John 1:12, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. So now I'm like, cool. I got the chocolate chip cookies. What do? So now I'm going to read the recipe on the back. So if I want to know how to make these cookies, I have to know what the recipe says. Same thing with us. If we want to know what a genuine follower of Jesus is, we have to read the recipe book, which is the Bible, and we have to make sure we know what's in here because this is what's going to tell us how to be genuine. Now, I learned this. I got another good example because Dusty, my 15-year-old, is 15 and 6 months. What does that mean? Driving. We almost got killed 3 times. It's fine. Okay. But we went to the MVD, got him his little booklet, their little, that you are supposed to study. Took him there. He got it. He read it over, threw it to the side, and then he got online. And he found all these MVD permit tests online, and he was taking the test, and he was doing all that. I know I'm going to pass it. He goes in, fails. Okay, I'm like, serious? Okay, next, because I know in my heart, no one's going to get this, but we love it when our kids get our driver's license because my life, this is our last child of 7. Okay, so once he gets in that car, my life is just changed drastically. So for us, it's a good thing. Most parents are like, we're like, here's the keys, have a nice life, okay? So I know every time he doesn't pass this test is one more day that I have to drive him around, okay? So I'm like, all right, Dusty, let's get studying. So what he did is he went back online, did all the tests online, went the next day, failed. Went the third day. Okay, so we're standing there at the third day for the test. And this woman is standing next to me, and she said, yeah, my daughter went online and did all those tests. She's failed every time. I finally had her study the right manual, and she passed. So I'm like, okay, whatever. My son's smarter than that. My son's smarter than that. Little sticker. He can pass the driving test in 5 times, I guess. But he said, so he went and took the test, and he failed it again. So I brought him home that night, and I said, here is the MVD book. You sit there and you study everything in here. You yellow it. You know it backwards and forwards because that is the only thing that I want you to know for that test. We took him back, and he passed. Okay, so case in point. Here it is. This is our recipe book. We have to know this, and that's why we do this study, because if we don't know that, we're going to be really confused in life because there's a lot of goofy people out there. There's a lot of goofy people telling you really goofy stuff, and we want to make sure that this is where you're getting your all your information from. I had a girl email me yesterday, and she said, I've been listening to you, and I want to know your stand on baptism, okay? And so we had this, because she said, it sounds like you're saying that you don't have to be baptized to be saved. So I had to do this whole long email on why Jesus is the only way that's going to get me to heaven. I'm going to get baptized because I love him and because he commands it. But if I have to say that it's Jesus plus something I do, then we're all messed up. But there's a lot of churches teaching that out there. And so I said, you know what? My bottom line was, study this for yourself. Go online, find out what the Bible says, pull up every verse you can, weigh it, let it Scripture interpret Scripture. Don't just take someone's word for it. I don't care if they're a church, a priest, or whatever. Figure it out for yourselves, because that's what we have to do, because we live in this world that everyone's telling us things, and a lot of them really isn't true. So once we have the recipe, now we have to get all of the little stuff here. Now, what I want to say here is that in this recipe, there's a lot of freedom, okay? If you want to use gold medal flour, you can, or you can use Great Value, or you can use Market Pantry. And I liken this to church. You and I can all go to different churches as long as we all have the main ingredients, which is Jesus alone. Then you can go to whatever church you would like to go to. And some people don't like that. They're like, well, my church is the right one, and yours is the wrong one. Here's the deal. My question is, do they believe that Jesus is the only way to God? And if they do, go for it, okay? Some of you like really charismatic churches. And you like to raise your hands, and you like to worship, and you like to praise Jesus and sing him for hours on hours. And that's wonderful, and that's great. I was never raised charismatic, okay? I tend to go to really more stronger Bible teaching, so we do less singing, more studying of the Bible. So is one worse than the other? And I'm going to say, no. Everyone is different. You and I are completely different people. One is not better or not better than the other one. So we have to give grace in this recipe here that we can go to 3 different churches. We go to CCV. I have a son that goes to Scottsdale Bible. I have another son and his wife. They go to West Valley Bible. I have one that goes to this Crossroads up in Anthem. We all go to different churches, okay? And that's okay. I was laughing when I was doing this because I was thinking, if you're a charismatic person and you go to a church like that, and for you, like, worship is big, okay? So me, if I like singing and I close my eyes and I raise my hand like this, okay, that's big time worship for me. Like, I am praising Jesus more than you can even imagine, okay, with one hand, little flipper out here. But we're all different, and we have to be able to embrace that and say, look, inside this recipe book, Jesus doesn't say you have to go to this specific church, or you have to pray this much, or you have to sing this much, or worship this way. Tons and tons and tons of freedom, and we have to love one another. Even if they don't, if they have the right recipe, which is Jesus alone, that's perfect. Now, when I put those things together, I want to make sure we understand something really important. You don't ask Jesus in your heart, and let's just say this is church, and let's say this is Bible reading, and this is, what else do we do? Pray. Okay, so you don't do these things to become a Christian. You do them because you're a Christian. Matt Chandler is a pastor of Village Church, and he says this: I study my Bible, I pray, I fast, I'm involved in a lot of spiritual disciplines, but I do these things because they increase my intimacy with Jesus. They push me further into my relationship with Christ. I don't do those things to be saved. I am saved, so I do those things. Okay, so we got to really make that distinction, because a lot of churches out there are like, great, now that you've come to Jesus, now you have to do. And that's not true. The Bible doesn't say that. You do all of these things because you now want to know him and you want to have a really good relationship with him. So, now, where am I at on my little thing? I was laughing because when we first started doing Bible study, I had these girls come and they would pray for me before I would do this. And I've never spoken in tongues. It's just kind of not my deal. And but I have no problem with it as long as it's in the recipe book. God does talk about speaking in tongues, so you need to find out what the rules are in here about it. But I laughed because they came around me and they started praying. I couldn't understand a word they were saying. And I'm like, what are they saying? I hope they're praying something really nice, because I have no idea. So, but it made me realize that, they're praying in tongues. That's their deal. Great. I hope it's nice, and I hope they prayed something really nice for me. I would rather you just pray so I can know what you're saying, okay? But that's just me. But there's other people that aren't like that, and we have to have a lot of grace and a lot of, for people who aren't like us, as long as they know Jesus. I like my cookies fluffy, and you may like them chewy. And as long as we have the right ingredients in there, have fun with that. Make it any way you want to at that point. Now, I do have to make one little warning on that. If, in fact, I decide that I take what the recipe is and I want to add broccoli to it, could you imagine? That's disgusting. A broccoli chocolate chip cookie. Okay, my cookie is now no longer genuine Nestle's Toll House cookie. So, if somebody comes to you and says, they're a little white shirt and a little tie, and they come on bicycles, and they knock on your door and they say, you don't have the full gospel, okay? Then we go back and we say, is it in the recipe? And if it's not, then you need to run, okay? Because we have got to get to the point where we stand up and say, no. This is the recipe. It's the Bible alone. And if anything outside of that comes in, it's not going to be a genuine follower of Christ. Just like broccoli added is not going to make my Nestle Toll House cookies genuine cookies any longer. So, now, once we get this, we mix it all together, and we come up with this, okay? And it's dough, and it's really good. Although this isn't, because it sat out in my car all night long in a tin. So don't come up here and think like, oh, that looks really good, and start eating it, because you probably will get really, really sick. So, once you become a Christian, remember, you have this now, and now we start going to church, and we start doing all these things, and we mix up, and we make ourselves dough. Okay, so now we say this. Now, the next step, once you do that, is you're going to go into the oven, okay, and you're going to bake for 11 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever. So I am going to say that the time between your dough and the time that you come out of the oven is our time on this earth as a Christian. We start out one way, and I'll tell you what, when you go in the oven, you better not stay like that. Because if you stay like that, something's really, really wrong with your cookie dough, okay? And it's same as a Christian. If nothing changes, because you go from this consistency to a cookie. Okay, then I even went further. When I eat this cookie, it's like I die and I go to heaven. Okay, so my stomach is heaven. This illustration took me months. I lay in bed at night and think, how can I make that sound right? Okay, so when it's all over and done and we die, cookie goes in your stomach. My stomach is like heaven, but I'm pretty sure heaven's cooler than my stomach. But between here and here, my point is that we're going to change. We have to change. There's nothing that says that we won't, because the Bible says that when he comes in, that's what's going to happen. Now, I'm going to show you how this happens. In your handout, you have the back page. It's hearts. I'm pretty proud of myself. I baked cookies, and I came up with this, which is totally God, because I have not 1 ounce of anything in my body that's good like this. But God just really made me see this, and it kind of made me understand something. That when you and I become a Christian, so this is where it looks like. The top left, the black heart. Before you come to Christ, that's kind of our hearts. And you're like, no, I was a really nice person. You may be a nice person. If you yelled at your mom once or stepped on your brother's toe or did something, you're a sinner just like the rest of us. Okay, so you have a black heart. Just go with me on that. Okay, now, once Jesus comes into our life, look what Ezekiel 36, 26, and 27 says. He says, a new heart will I give you, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you shall heed my ordinances and do them. Okay, so once we become a Christian, now we have this brand new heart, and it's red. Now, I want to distinguish one thing. The bottom heart is how Jesus looks at us. That's how God looks at us. He looks at us completely covered. Our sins are covered. No problem. He did that. But while we're in this baking time on this earth, okay, we have a lot of stuff in our life. And God wants to take that stuff and make us look more and more like Jesus. So what he's doing is he's purifying all the things in our life. So what I did, and apparently not very well, because I made some stuff in red and then I covered it over in red. I have no idea what they said. But those 2 boxes, let's just say, that are covered completely. Maybe one was fear and one was anxiety. And maybe God has been working desperately with you on that. Every single time you're fearful, he's like, Lisa, he's like, he's working that out of you. Don't be fearful. Go to the scriptures. Stand on my promises. Do whatever. Now, while he's working on your pride, maybe you're a gossip. Maybe you're bitter towards somebody. Maybe you have a lot of other issues, but he's working on your anxiety problem. Okay, now, to the rest of us that know you, or the rest of the people that know me, they're like, well, you're a hypocrite. Well, did you know me when I was really, really anxious a year ago, and God's taken that away? Now he's going to move on to something else. He doesn't change us overnight, and we got to get that, because we can be the most judgmental, ridiculous people on this earth because we expect people to change now and today. But when we see the disciples, we see they started out, they spent 3 years with Jesus, and they still didn't get what he was trying to say, and they didn't change until they continued to grow in their faith. So it's kind of like if you have a jealousy problem and God is dealing with that, but you may still have a drinking problem. And maybe you have a drinking problem and you drink 4 glasses of wine at night and you're starting to feel convicted and go, you know what, it doesn't work for me. But you've gone down to 1 glass a night, but no one knows that but you, because you know God's doing something in your life. And eventually, you may be like, I don't want a glass of wine tonight. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wine. I have a whole family that drinks it. But I'm just saying that those are the things that we have to look at in our life. And eventually, as we're baking, I look at this like this is the baking time, and God's coloring in these boxes as he's baking us is kind of what I look at it. And hopefully when we go to heaven, the majority of our heart will be red, and very few will be white. I was in California with my brother this year. Perfect example of this. I don't really swear, it's just, things will pop out of my mouth every so often. I dropped chicken one time, cooked chicken, a whole thing of barbecue chicken on the floor, and out comes a bad word, and you know how that goes. But this summer, it was with my brother and his wife, and the phone was ringing, and I was trying to have a conversation. It was one of those things, and I was so frustrated, and out flies this bad word. And my brother looks at me like, not only are you a Christian, you teach Bible, and you talk like that, And I was so embarrassed, but it's not the normal thing that happens, but it did. And it made me realize, you know that language box? It's probably 3/4 of the way colored in, but it's not fully, and it's going to raise its ugly little head every so often. We have a friend of ours that, like, I like to travel, it's my big thing, and since we lost all of our money, we haven't been able to do that. And so I was on Facebook, and I saw a friend that went to Ireland. She had all her pictures from Ireland. I was so jealous. I was shocked. I was like, well, how come she gets to go? And I want to go. That's not fair. God must love her more than me. Whatever. But it's one of those things like it just rears its head every so often. And I have to go, God, I am so sorry. And recognizing it is the first step to letting God change us. If you're a witch to your husband, you better recognize it when you do it and say, God, I don't want to do that anymore. We got to work with him so that he can change us from the inside out. So, is it time to go yet? Jeez, what time is it? Oh, we have 6 more minutes. Cool. Okay, I'm going to run through real quick and tell you, now that we got that out of the way, now you know you got to change because that's just what happens. So I want to give you a quick overview of where we've been, so when we start back next week with John and Judas, you'll know where we are. For those of you that are new, we're in the midst of a series on the Gospel of Luke, and we are just going verse by verse because we feel like that's the best way to study the Bible, so we know we don't miss anything along the way. So Luke was written by Luke. He was a doctor and a historian, and he was hired by a man by the name of Theophilus, and Theophilus paid him to go and kind of be a news reporter, let's just say. So he would go and interview like Mary or the guy who was blind, and he would say, so, hey, what really happened? And so he would pull all of this together, and he compiled everything there was to know about Jesus because he interviewed all these people, and so that's where we get the Gospel of Luke from. If you look at your handout, Luke 1, the very, very first of Luke, he says this, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also to me to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. So we have the Gospel of Luke, which we're studying because Luke wrote all of these things down so that we could know Jesus and we could know the way he heals and the way he loves and the way he died on the cross for us. All of those things, that's why we have that. So up through May, we went through the birth of John the Baptist, the birth of Jesus. We saw Jesus was when he was 12. Then Jesus is baptized. His ministry starts. He's out preaching and healing and teaching and doing all the things, casting out demons. And what he does is he brings something different because there's this whole religious sect out there that has rules and regulations. And Jesus says, if you just hang out with me, I'll change your life. That's what I do. It's not a bunch of rules. You may think that you have to do, but if you just come to me, and if no one's ever done that, if you've been like, I don't even know what that means, it's real simple. Jesus, come in my life. Change me. I don't even know what that looks like, but I know that he will come in and change your life, and that's just what he promises to do. He says, I'm going to give you a new heart, and that bitterness you feel for that person, you're not going to have that anymore. And that husband who drives you crazy and you just kind of want to kick him to the street, I'm going to give you a whole lot of love for him because that's what I do. That addiction you have, I'm going to take that away from you. Because remember, now you have a new heart. Before you had this black heart. Couldn't do much with a black heart. But now it's this new, brand new heart. And his spirit lives within us, and he's changing all of these things in our life to make us look more and more like him. The more we look like him, the more people are going to want to come to him. So I think it was interesting that the religious men of the day, they thought they were perfect. They were like the ones that never cussed and never drank and never looked at women lustfully and did those things. But Jesus comes in and says something that just rocked the world of all these people, these Jewish people who were so frightened of the law. I can't keep it. And Jesus comes along and says, those people that are really lustful and the people that drink too much and the people that cuss too much, those are the people that I came to save. Like, I came to save sinners. That's what I did. So if you're here or you're listening online and you're thinking, I've just been way too bad. I've been way too bad. I've done way too many things. Jesus is like, you're my perfect candidate. It's a prerequisite for Jesus for you to be a sinner and for me to be a sinner. He loves that. And we think it's like so shocked by our sin. And he's totally not shocked by anything. He was most comfortable with the sinners. Think about Levi when he went to the tax collector Levi. And he's going, hey, follow me. Now, Levi was the worst sinner ever. He was a tax collector and he was a Jewish man that collecting Roman taxes. Jewish people hated him. So you've got Peter, James, John, and the guys, and they walk up, and they're like, Jesus is like, hey, Levi, come follow me. And you can just feel the tension with these guys, and we get the same way. God, they're too much of a sinner. I don't want to be around that girl. She drinks too much, or she takes too many drugs, or she's a prostitute, or whatever. And Jesus is like, I love that girl. I'm more comfortable with her than I am these religious people. So you can see the tension that's going on in Luke right now with these religious people and with Jesus. And I was thinking about this, and we'll end on this, but I thought, imagine you and I walking down the street and Jesus saying, come be my followers. And we're like, cool, that's so exciting. And he takes us down to Van Buren. And we're like, okay, this is weird. And he walks up to the short skirt, low cut top prostitute, and she just smoked a bunch of crack before she was out there. And Jesus is like, I want you to follow me. And we're just going, whoa, whoa, whoa. We did go to the nice church up in the Upper West Side over here, and this is kind of out of my comfort zone. And then not only does Jesus say, follow me, he says, let's go have a party at your house. And I want you to invite all your prostitute friends, okay? So now we have to go to this party because Jesus is like, okay, we're going to it, and we're all freaking out. And he's like, we walk in, and now there's not just one girl with low-cut shirts and short skirts and high heels. Now there's 50 of them, okay? And half of them are doing drugs in the back, and Jesus is so comfortable because he said, I came to seek and save what's lost. These people need a doctor. I didn't come for the religious group that thinks they got all that. I came for those who really are desperate and they need a savior. And so when you and I think like people are too bad to be saved, they are Jesus' specialty. And we got to get that because that's what Jesus was trying to teach Peter and James and John, that he came for everybody, regardless of race or regardless of job status or regardless of who's the biggest sinner. That's what Jesus does. And once we get that, then we can move on in our lives and say, I want to have the heart that Jesus has. He cared for people more than the religious groups, and we have to learn to be just like him. So I think the problem is that we are so concerned more for people's sin. We want them to change faster than they want to change. And Jesus is like, would you just leave them to me? I will change them on my timing. You quit worrying about them. All right, there was a lot of stories in that particular lesson. I guess that's what happens when I come back from vacation. But hopefully you will see why the Bible is so important for us as our recipe for life. See you next week.